Why I studied Islamic thought for 2 years was because of hijab. The biggest thing when it comes to hijab is the scholars are not going to tell you. They're not. Because the ruling is true. We looked at her and said, it's a requirement. I was about to ask the same question. I was like, I'm not about to get myself caught up in this. It is a personal faith issue that is public. Nothing else is like that, you know, and that scared me. As a minority in this country, I was scared to look Muslim. Every single time they saw me, they would just say something negative. It hurt my soul. Crippled me. And I say I have trauma because of that bad. But your ears go directly on your heart and they sit on your heart. And they impact your beliefs about how the world works. This is a problem of iman. If you believe in the Quran 100%, then you dissecting every single word and trying to make sense and use your nafs. I loved it. I love the hijab. I really do, in my heart of hearts. And at college, what do? You go to frat parties. So I'm like, okay, I don't drink anyway, so I'm gonna go. But I'm just gonna see what's up. You know, friends are going, I'm going too. And I just threw the chair, acted like a crazy woman, and I walked out. And I said, I don't belong here. So many people ask me about hijab. It's an interesting thing because hijab is a habit. This is something that you put on daily when you go outside. But it's also very complicated, okay? Too complicated. Not that Islam is complicated, but because of systems in which we live in. And since I talk about habit systems, I'm gonna come in here and blow your mind because I've looked everywhere, searched everywhere in order to make sense of what's happening currently. And it's just a little bit more complex. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit in depth. We're going to go top, bottom up. So what that means is we use the Quran and Hadith in order to explain what's going on. And we use our personal habits and our personal understanding and knowledge and current day research and history in order to understand what is going on in order to actually change our habits. Okay, that's the whole thing. It's about not getting information, but actually making it have an impact. So one of the biggest things for me, hijab has been a struggle since day one. It still is. I think I'm a lot better now because my systems are really, you know, it supports it. Why I studied Islamic thought for 2 years was because of hijab. I couldn't understand the rulings behind it, so I went searching for it. It's actually kind of interesting because I found my teacher in maqasid shariah, who is the best mind, the best researcher, and I was searching for him everywhere. I needed answers. Books weren't doing it. Lectures weren't doing it. I needed detail. I needed critical assessment, and all of this in-depth, you know, fiqh and sharia and stuff like that. I needed to understand that. So I was looking everywhere. I was praying on it. I went through it, okay? It was really rough. So I went to the ISNA conventions. I got a free ticket. I've never been a day in my life before. A lot of people go since they're babies. So I went there and it was on sharia, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I want to know more about law, so let me go. And mind you, I was, you know, fully dressed, you know, the way that we do. But when the questions and answers section came up, I was like, oh, I need to ask him because this is really interesting. I want to know more. And there's another woman in front of me, mind you, this was a Muslim convention, but she wasn't wearing the hijab. So he saw her and she was asking about hijab. He looked at her and said, it's a requirement. I was about to ask the same question. I was like, I'm not about to get myself caught up in this. I was like, so where can I learn more, right? And then I took his classes, and then I found out that there was a program, and he's actually the first person in which I learned under, and that's when I got into the program in order to understand Islamic studies. So I learned from him, but the biggest thing when it comes to hijab is the scholars are not going to tell you. They're not. Because the ruling is true that it is a requirement. There's no way you can flip it in order to say that the hijab is not a requirement. I need us to stop there because this is a problem of iman. If you believe in the Quran 100%, then you dissecting every single word and trying to make sense and use your nafs and all of, you know, your history and all of that in order to dissect it, in order to negate the word of, you know, the Quran, that's a problem. We shouldn't be going in that area. But what we don't understand, and I think what society, especially Muslim communities, missing is that they don't understand systems. So here is how the world works. You have a law, and then you have the systems, and then you have the habits right in between. So that's how it works. But the way that we've done it, or the way that we're teaching Islam, we have a law, but we do not take into consideration the system at all. And we focus on our habits. So that means if a woman wants to wear hijab, we say, hey, wear the hijab, it's a requirement. That's it. That's it. Like we don't talk about the system and how the system impacts us, how Muslim history, Islamic history, how the lack of teaching, all of that stuff, we don't consider it. But it's an important part. So the maqasid of the sharia is in order to preserve you so that you can live your best life here and that your akhirah is not in compromise. That is the purpose of it. This is what scholars have already researched. So there are 5 sections. There's your deen, there is your life, there is your faith, there's the preservation of deen, the preservation of life, lineage, mind, and wealth. Those are the 5 requirements. Whenever any sort of law, be it alcohol, that's not a preservation of mind. When it comes to riba, that's not a preservation of wealth. When it comes to hijab, it's all over the place, and this is what the interesting part is. So I'm going to break it down for you, tell you my story, because I struggled with it from day one. I've had trauma because of hijab. I have taken it on, I have put it off, I've struggled with it, and then I ultimately learned, and I want you to know this from the beginning, it is going to be you building personal habit systems in order to come back to the message of Allah. That is literally the purpose of life. That is what you're supposed to do. Is it going to take you time? Yeah, it took me time, so I'm not going to be out here talking about something I didn't do, you know what I'm saying? You need to understand that it's a system issue, because hijab is the one thing that is a deen thing that's actually public. I can't think of any. Y'all let me know if there is any one. But a woman has to wear hijab when she steps out of her house. A personal faith issue that is public. Nothing else is like that. And now it's become more because there's politics involved in it. So we're going to talk about all of those steps and then how I went through them, because my story is a little bit wild, you guys, okay? So the first thing is going to be preservation of faith. This is going to be the most important. Some scholars debate whether it's going to be life or deen. The reason they do this is because if you're not alive, then you can't really practice your deen. When it comes to preservation of life, the idea is there is this one Quran verse, and that's the one they always refer to, as long as there is no compulsion within your heart and the situation and circumstances say that you might die, you are able to renounce your faith publicly with your mouth or externally, so long as it doesn't corrupt your heart. So that's kind of what they use when they are creating fatwas whenever it comes to anything. So when 9/11 happened, and I am a 9/11 baby in the sense that I came to America a few months after it happened, and we had hate crimes that were happening. So there were fatwas that were coming out when this hate crime was coming out. So when I was studying Islamic history, this is kind of when I started seeing things, because it's hard to look at your current situation and judge it, right? For instance, it's contemporary. We really don't know what we're in and how to go about it. But if you look at Al-Andalus, which was Muslim Spain, one of the issues that they had was when the Catholics took over, it was Muslim Spain for about 800 years. And they took over, what they would do is force them to eat pig, pork, in order to see if they're Muslim or not. So this was a systematic method of cleansing the country of Islam, right? And fatwas came out during that time because of what happened during the Prophet's time in order to kind of preserve the community. And that's an important part. If all the Muslims are dead within your community, then the preservation of Islam is not possible. So on a systematic level, that's why kind of fatwas exist during specific circumstances. And the one thing that we really have to really understand, is that one, there is globalization. Even if you are not a minority in your country, if you're in a Muslim majority country, because the ideals are Western, a lot of women who are not wearing the hijab is coming from that system. Okay. Another thing is also if you're a minority in a majority country, like we're about 3% in America. And that is a minority ruling. So what that means is that there are nuances. For instance, when I was talking about this and I was researching this years ago, and I'd post a Facebook post on it, one girl from Ethiopia, where I'm from, saw that and she's like, that's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy to you because you said, right? Like your system is supporting you. Like it's not, we don't even question. If you go to Ethiopia, especially the part that I'm from, hijab is a way of life. It's a right. So when you travel around the world, also you see the differences because of the systems that have been set up. For instance, in Sri Lanka, they don't wear hijab because they've been colonized over and over and over again. And the opportunities that they have, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So when you go to Dubai, it's different. Morocco, Ethiopia, it's different. There's this globalization, the history that has happened has impacted it. When it comes to the preservation of life, let's go back to the requirements of the law. That is why you see women who don't wear it. We need to be human. That's why, preservation of life. So if you don't have a protector and you might die, post 9/11. The biggest thing that I've realized now, because I live in the Atlanta area, is that times have changed. Okay, literally nobody cares. We are in a very liberal America, to the point that I was at the park with my kids. I saw a black man in stilettos, I don't know what they are, but high boots with like pumps, okay? Walking femininely in the streets. I'm like, we're not public enemy number one anymore. It's nobody cares what we look like. Nobody cares what anybody looks like. And you don't try people. You don't do that. So you can peacefully walk about the earth. So for me, growing up in post 9/11 America, my parents, my family said no. You are not allowed to wear. You're not. Like, I heard so many negative talks, judgment, all of this stuff. It wasn't something that you do. Appearing Muslim was a big problem, you know, and that scared me as a minority in this country. I was scared to look Muslim. It was practice as you may, whatever, not really. Do what you do. That's kind of the upbringing that I came into. But stick to your values. Don't be doing nothing stupid, right? So preservation of life, like being scared, going out alone with wearing hijab. There are 3 reasons, usually Quranically, as to why women wear it. And this is what I did. I had nothing else. I had literally no teacher, no nothing. So the Quran was my guide. So I'd look to it oftentimes, and that's how I made my decisions. And without knowing fiqh, I learned about fiqh and law and all of that stuff afterwards in order to make sense of it, because application was hard. So the biggest reason is, 1, it's a command of Allah. Number 2, so you might not be harassed. And number 3, so that you might be seen as an honorable woman. So there's a reason behind everything. Even when it talks about alcohol, if there's some good in it, there's some bad in it, but it's better if you don't. It is very gentle when the Quran talks to you. And that's a big thing that we don't do within our community. You know, we're not dealing with our logic. We're not teaching people. We're just enforcing, and that is a challenge. And then number 2 is going to be deen. For instance, for me, I put on the hijab I was so energetic. I wanted to put it on, and I heard the worst things. I heard the worst things for why I shouldn't. I had somebody that I admired with my life who every time they saw me in hijab, when I made this decision, when I was about to make the decision, every single time they saw me, they would just say something negative. It hurt my soul, crippled me. And I say I have trauma because of that. Because the way the world works is the world happens to you, but we cannot function alone. We have families, we have friends, and we use that to gauge what's happening. And the biggest thing is, you know, you can close your eyes if you see something bad, but your ears go directly on your heart, and they sit on your heart. And they impact your beliefs about how the world works. So for me, that's kind of what happened. I put it on, I loved it. I love the hijab. I really do, in my heart of hearts. It has done so much good for me, and it has done exactly what it said, right? It protected me in college, so I wasn't around bad people. Actually, why I put it on is because I went to college. I was, you know, finding myself when I turned 18, and, you know, I had all of these friends, and there were a lot of international people. And at college, what do? You go to frat parties. So I'm like, okay, I don't drink anyway, so I'm gonna go, but I'm just gonna see what's up. You know, friends are going, I'm going too. So I go there, they offer me alcohol, I say no, but 2 people were having a conversation back and forth, and they're both from India. And he is in a white frat, mind you, right? The frat member, and then one of my friends is Indian as well. And they were talking, and they said, oh, where are you from? Where are you from? And they're having this conversation back and forth, and one of them says he's from this region. So my friend goes and says, oh, you must be Muslim then. The man panicked. Like, literally, he's like, how dare you? Like, not dare you, but he was so embarrassed. And he's like, no. My parents are Muslim. I'm not. And that's the point. I just threw the chair, acted like a crazy woman, and I walked out. And I said, I don't belong here. And I want something to show that I don't belong. I wanted to stand out. As a woman, as a single woman who was all alone, didn't have a single family member while I was in college, I just could not. Like, I couldn't. Like, I needed some sort of protection, and it was my protection because it kept me away from the bad places. It kept me away from the bad people, and they knew, like, as soon as they see you, the hijab speaks for you. And I think I loved that. Even though there was this one guy, he's like, why don't I see you at the clubs? I'm like, do you think this is a fashion choice? Of course, I wear it like a turban from time to time, but I'm wearing it all the time. I'm like, dude, like, why isn't that sinking in? But, you know, it really protected me, and I fell in love with it. But what happened is that a few years later, we're talking about 3-4 years, I woke up one day and I realized I had no faith. I had nothing. I had no love for this deen. And I knew exactly why it was. It was because of this piece of fabric that I had on my head.